And now we are ready for the exciting wine tasting experience. So get ready for a truly amazing experience. Madrona Vineyards and Paul Bush came highly recommended from someone who many of you know and have worked with in the past, Jim Johnson. I want to give Jim a special shout out. Thank you for connecting us with Paul and Maggie. Madrona Vineyards is a boutique family-operated winery nestled in the heart of the El Dorado appellation of the Sierra foothill. The Bush family, considered pioneers of the high-elevation grape growing in California, planted their first 32-acre vineyard in 1973. The single planting helped build up the renaissance of vineyards and wine throughout the 1970s and 80s of the historic wine region. With the transition to the next generation of grape growers and winemakers, Paul and Maggie Bush took the reins in 1999. The philosophy of making wines that are pure reflections of this unique mountain terroir and cool climate drives the creativity and traditional characters embodied in each variety. Now, with 85 acres of naturally farmed, no herbicide or organic product vines, all within the 2,800 to 3,000 foot elevation, Paul and Maggie embrace their 100% estate-grown wines as an expression not only of the region, but as an expression of their passion for showcasing the exciting aspects of one of California's oldest growing regions. Old vines, family passion, and almost 50 years of experience has come together to produce something truly special in the wine world. It's no wonder that in 2018, the Lonely Planet Guide to Winemaking recommended Madrona Vineyards as a top winery from the highest ranked wine region in California to visit. Estate-grown, history in the making. Paul, Maggie, welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you, Debbie, for this opportunity and everything. And since you've pretty much done the entire story, I think we're pretty much done. So,
I think we're just getting started. You know, one of the questions that I received was should people open the red? And what I'm wondering is, you know, I guess I'm just going to fully turn it over to you. We do have the question and answer portion available. You see those between Tim and Ethan and myself. We'll jump in with questions. We do have a couple that were posed initially, so we'll sprinkle those in, but we'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you. If you haven't figured it out already, I'm Paul and this is Maggie. We are Madrona Vineyards, and just a little bit about what we are. I make the wines and grow the grapes, and Maggie pretty much runs the business. And so as a team, we get to work with some incredible people and make some wines that we really enjoy drinking. So getting to your question about opening up the red, if the question has to do with, does it need to breathe? It doesn't need to breathe. It doesn't need any sort of decanting or anything. It's tasting phenomenal, just straight out of the bottle. In fact, we did a little bit of tasting ahead of time here. So we know that it's working nicely. But having done enough of these Zoom virtual tastings and everything, and my propensity to just talk and talk and talk, I recommend, or we recommend, that you actually open up the Chardonnay and pour yourself a glass of the Chardonnay. And that will kind of give you a primer as to where we're going. That way I can talk a little bit about the history and what we are and what we're doing here while you're enjoying the Chardonnay. And then we'll go over the Chardonnay, and then we'll move back into the Quintet, which is our red wine, and go from there. So, and yeah, Debbie, whenever there's a question, please break in and let me know, because that, I think, is one of the best parts about talking to either the owners or the winemaker, or I happen to grow the grapes too. So if you have grape, wine, or business questions, bring them in. So assuming you all have a little bit of Chardonnay in your glass, I want to tell you a little bit about our business here. So yes, Debbie was correct that we started in 1973. We're a small family-owned winery, and understand that we make between 10 to 12,000 cases a year, which it sounds like a lot. You know, that's 120 to 150,000 bottles a year. Once the family drinks what we need, there's like 2,000 bottles. No, in any case, what you get is we are not big enough to even be called small. We are a boutique winery. That's one of the first things to understand. The second thing is that we're estate grown. That is the most stringent of all of the quality aspects from the government. And it means that we grow 100% of our grapes. We make 100% of our wines, and we bottle them ourselves. So that's what estate grown means. And it's actually, if you look on a label, it's the little tiny print often at the bottom of the label that says produced and bottled by, or estate produced and bottled by, or vinted and bottled by, or whatever. They all mean slightly different things. If it says estate grown or estate produced and bottled by, it means that you grew the grapes 100%, you made the wine, just like I was talking about. If it says produced and bottled by, it means that you may or may not have grown the grapes, but you made the wine and bottled it yourself. If it says vinted and bottled by or cellared and bottled by, it generally means that you bought the wine on the bulk market from a larger winery or something like that, and then put your label onto it. So they all mean slightly different things, okay? That's your wine education du jour. Now, if you start looking at who we are, yeah, we're estate grown, we're a small family owned and operated 100% boutique winery. We're also one of the highest elevation vineyards, and that gets us back to when we started in 1973. So my parents, my mom had grown up in this area, and understand, we're not farmers by, well, I guess we're farmers by trade now. Well, you are now. But the point of it is that my dad, he had his doctorate in metallurgical engineering from Stanford. My mom, who is a school teacher and a master's in music and child education, they both had other types of careers, but they found this piece of land in an area that they truly loved, which was El Dorado County, at a high elevation, and it had a 32-acre field on it. And my mom and dad went to the ag advisor and the ag commissioner and said, hey, what should we do with this land? We need to do something with it. And they said, well, you might plant Christmas trees or grapes. And considering grapes were a little bit more interesting, and that my dad really, I love the idea that you would grow a product for its quality, not how it looked, but for its quality of flavor and character and all those types of things. And that's where wine grapes came in. So I assume that all families in California have the same type of family that I grew up in, which, stop laughing, and it is, we had the flora and fauna books of California. And as my parents started looking through, at the time in the early 70s, if you were growing poison oak in your area, you could grow quality grapes, okay? But as my parents looked through these flora books, they found that there was a more indicator, a tree that could indicate better quality soils and better quality climate for growing grapes. And you found it all across the areas like Mendocino and Sonoma, the quality parts of Napa, the slightly higher elevation parts, and in a very narrow band that ran across the foothills. And it happens to be the Madrone. And the Madrone tree, it likes well-drained soils, just like grapes do. It likes a cool climate, and the climate at this elevation in El Dorado is similar to that of Sonoma in terms of temperatures and everything. And then it just personified where you could do something. So my parents took that gamble and planted the highest elevation vineyard in California. And for years, for decades, we were the highest elevation vineyard and winery in all of California. It does mean that we have some issues with frost, snow, those types of things. But it also means that we get a unique character out of all the wines that we make. And that's why now, even though when we planted, there were probably only about 20 acres of vineyards in the area, now there's over 2,500 acres of vineyards in the area. And now there are, what, 76 wineries in the El Dorado County and El Dorado appellation. And so it really has grown as more and more wineries are looking for higher elevation, cool climate grapes. And so we actually sell a fair amount to wineries on the coast that are looking for high quality, but at a reasonable price. And that's what you get out of El Dorado. So that's your primer on starting the vineyard. And if you look at the label, our logo is a madrone tree. And this madrone tree is actually in the middle of the vineyard. And most madrone trees, from my understanding, you know, they might grow to have a 15, 18 inch diameter trunk. And then at 150 years or so, that's kind of their lifespan. The one we have in the middle of the vineyard has a 13.5-foot circumference trunk. It's a massive, massive tree, and maybe 350 years old or something like that. But it sits in the middle of the vineyard and is just doing wonderfully, because grapes and madrones, they don't like a lot of water. And so you end up getting a kind of a symbiotic relationship between the two. And thus, that's why we have the label, and we're Madrona Vineyards. So now we're gonna go a little bit into the Chardonnay now, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the history, okay? So one of the things that I wanted, Debbie, you mentioned this, and so it brought it back to my mind. One of the things that I'd like to talk about is the difference between terroir and typicity. And these are two terms that, if you don't learn anything else today, learn these two terms, because it makes it possible for you to be super snobby with your super snobby friends, and be snobbier, if you want to say, because it actually means something about the quality of the wines and the characteristics. So here goes. Typicity. Typicity is the typical characteristics that you will find in a variety of grape, regardless of where it's grown. So let's take Merlot. Whether you grow it in Bordeaux, or you grow it in the heart of El Dorado, or if you grow it in Chile or Argentina or South Africa, it will always have some sort of plum and dark cherry character, okay? It doesn't matter where you grow it, that's a characteristic of it. Terroir. Terroir are the typical characteristics that you'll find from a region, regardless of the variety. So, in Merlot, it might be from this area, it might be an earthiness or a minerality, but it's the same in our Zinfandel, and it's the same in our Cabernet Sauvignon. And the minerality goes into all of our white wines as well, and it comes across as a lemon lime kind of stone fruit kind of characteristic that comes through. Now, the unique thing about it is, I'm not arguing that the wines, well, I can argue all day long that the wines here in El Dorado are better than anywhere in the world. It's not necessarily true. They're just different. The characteristics that you find out of the Sierra foothills, especially at this elevation, can't be found anywhere else in the world. Just like the wines out of Napa, or the wines out of Alsace, or the wines out of the Hunter Valley, they're unique and they're special. And it's not just wine that does that. It can be carrots, or it can be tomatoes, or it can be beef, or it can be all the things that are associated with your particular soils, your particular climate, and all the, as the French might say, the je ne sais quoi that you can't explain on the rest of it. So that is what you embrace out of these small wineries that are dotted around the Sierra foothills. Add that into the second part of it, which is, because all the wineries in El Dorado, for sure, they're all family-owned, family-operated wineries. They have a unique personality that's associated with them, and you're going to taste the passion of the winemaker in each glass that you taste, okay? Now, when it comes down to it, you know, I was thinking about your business and what it is and everything. And the fact is, I make the wines for two people. I make it for me and for Maggie, because those are the only two palates that I know. I hope other people like them, but there's no guarantees on that. But I just make the best quality wine I can out of the grapes that give the expression that I believe in. But that's not all that different than your business, in that for us, the locals, they buy our wines because they trust that we make a style that they enjoy. That for you guys, people work with you because they trust that you're going to make good decisions that make some sense. And so, literally sense. And it is one of those combinations that works together. Now, when you taste this Chardonnay or smell it, you pick up, it has that wonderful kind of honey cream characteristic in the nose. Now, here's one of the things that I want to talk about. Here's one of the many things I want to talk about. When it comes to Chardonnay and in the tasting room, if we were to ask somebody, oh, what characteristics do you like in Chardonnay? They would generally say, oh, I love the buttery characteristics of Chardonnay and that vanilla character. Okay, that doesn't have anything to do with Chardonnay. That's how you make it, okay? Chardonnay is a malleable variety and is often overworked by winemakers so that you lose the characteristics of Chardonnay. So what you're looking for, Chardonnay has very elegant characters that might be pineapple or green apple or slight peach characteristics or some aspects of citrus or that kind of thing. That's Chardonnay. When you start getting into the oaky profiles and the creaminess and all those types of things, that's the personality of the winemaker that's doing it, okay? So when you start on the nose on this wine, it has that honey characteristic. It has a ripe pear peach characteristic coming out, but it also has that kind of creme brulee creaminess character that's coming through. That's the oakiness that's coming through on this wine because it was barrel fermented in new and 1-year-old French oak barrels, okay? I'm just being straight up and honest. That's not a terroir aspect, that is a winemaking aspect. But what I get proud about on this wine is when you taste it, okay? So everybody, this is your homework and job, taste it. What I get proud about on this wine is the balance on the wine. It starts out, it has this wonderful kind of green apple characteristic that starts at the very beginning, and then it just goes across the palate like that. It doesn't have this roller coaster of an experience all the way through where it's like, wow, oh. Instead, you end up getting this really nice, just fine palate that just then continues on, and then even what? 20 seconds later, and I'm still picking up those characteristics of lemon and lime on the back side of it. It's not tart, it's not overly rich. You can actually chill this wine slightly, which is unusual for Chardonnays because Chardonnays close up when they're chilled down. But if you want to have a little bit more of a racy experience, chill this Chardonnay down and it'll go with spicier foods and those types of things. If you like it a little more opulent and a little richer, serve it closer to room temperature, and you'll get that butterscotch on the backside of the palate melding with the rest of the wine. So that green apple, that slight pear that's coming through on it, there's even kind of a honeydew characteristic that works through this Chardonnay as well.
I think that honey character is the Winty clone.
Yeah, so this is a blend of 2 different clones. Maggie's right, the Winty clone is out of Livermore, if you know Winty Brothers. That is the premier clone of Chardonnay in California. Now, clones of grapes, understand that Chardonnay is Chardonnay. Genetically, it's the same. But over years, you may notice in your vineyard that one particular vine shows a unique characteristic. And you say, you know, I wish that were in my entire vineyard. What you can do is take the buds from that one particular vine and graft it into the rest of your vineyard, and you will grow that clone now of Chardonnay. So the Winty clone is famous because it has this hens and chicks cluster, which means big berries and little tiny berries at the same time on the same cluster. And it has beautiful kind of honey characteristics up front on it, which not all Chardonnay clones exhibit. And so you get that coming through, and it generally has a really nice texture because it holds its acid really nicely as well. And so that makes up part of this. And then the other part of it is the Clone 4, which is the original planting of Chardonnay that we did in 1973. Now, what's unique about that is all of our vineyards here at Madrona, the estate, they're all own rooted, which is almost unheard of nowadays. Nowadays, you would graft onto rootstocks that have super romantic names like 10113 or 1114 or 420A or 110R, you know, and they all are different. What we have is Chardonnay above the ground and Chardonnay in the ground. Means we're susceptible to a root louse called phylloxera, but it hasn't come up into our vineyard. And so we still have these 45, 47-year-old vineyards on their own roots. Now, does it make a better wine? I can't argue that it does, but I can tell you, because our other vineyards we have on rootstocks, there is a translation of the soil with the rootstock. So if I'm using 10114, which is one of my favorite rootstocks, the juice on the same variety, same clone and everything will come out slightly higher pH than if I'm doing it with a vine side by side that's own rooted. So there is a translation. So for purists, having own rooted vines, that's what the world would really want. It's just too risky nowadays. Am I getting in the weeds? Is that the problem? I'm starting to go down a rabbit hole again.
That's my job.
to rein me back in.
You actually, Paul, you answered my question. I was, as you were making the point about the Chardonnays having their own stock, I thought, so what? But being a little bit of a nerd, I appreciate it. I know.
Thank you. See, there are nerds. Nerds unite.
Are there any questions about the Chardonnay at this point?
Can you hear me? This is Tim.
Yes.
So I'm a big red wine guy.
Okay.
And I have to tell you, this is the best Chardonnay I've ever had.
Thank you.
By a long margin. What it reminds me of, though, is I'm from the Finger Lakes region, upstate New York.
Yep.
And they're big Riesling grape growers, right? But the dry Riesling, they say cellar, and it gets better.
Yep.
And so I did. I took some dry Riesling, I stuck it in my wine cellar for 4 or 5 years, and I came out. And I have to tell you, this reminds me of it. It's so well balanced. So my question is, can you cellar this Chardonnay? How long have you tried it from your own stash?
So understand that vintage to vintage is very different.
Sure.
So I can tell you that we had an 83 Chardonnay about a year ago.
Yeah. When Paul's father passed away, we dug around and found some old bottles.
Yeah, we had the 78, 79, 80, and 81 cabs. Those were off the charts. But the 83, okay, the 83 Chardonnay, do you remember the vintage in 83? Maybe not, but the weather wasn't perfect in 83. However, it was a super butterscotchy style of Chardonnay, the malolactic, and it really gave it this diacetyl kind of buttery characteristic. And that in itself isn't one way or the other on ageability, but the wine really was tasting great. And I wouldn't generally age out California Chardonnay. It's not the style for it. Riesling for sure. Rieslings age beautifully. They're high in acid, low in pH, and that acid acts as an antioxidant, so it protects it over time. Chardonnays generally don't have that kind of acidity. However, when you taste this Chardonnay has enough acid in it to keep it kind of bright and lively, which bodes well for the ageability of the wine. But is it going to do it for 40 years? I can't tell you that. Would this wine age for 10? Sure. But the bigger question is, why? So will it improve? If you were to buy a case of Chardonnay, I would say, yeah, put 2 bottles down to taste it year 8 and year 10. Okay, don't risk 100% of the wine or something like that. Do that. But if you only buy 1 or 2 bottles of it, it's tasting really good right now. So are you really going to gain anything from it? Now, and from my understanding, this will be the quiz for the 3 of you. On average, how much time is there between a person buying a bottle of wine and drinking the same bottle of wine? What's the average?
I'm gonna guess 24 hours.
Okay.
Mean or median?
You got some fellow nerds here, Paul.
We'll go with mean on this one then, no.
Yeah, I would say something like 48 hours.
Okay.
I was gonna guess a week, but okay.
All right. Well, you guys are very
Generous.
well, I was going to say they're very pessimistic,
Yeah.
but you are better than most people in the tasting room who would guess, oh, a year or 2 years or whatever. It's 6 hours. So,
Really?
so
I win.
but it answers a question that generally wineries are making wines to be drunk. So if you happen to be a person that just had a child and say, now I want to get something that you can open up when they're 21 years old, that's a much harder thing to find than it used to be. Now, having said that, let's talk terroir one more time. We're high elevation here, 3,000 feet elevation. All of our vineyards, like Debbie was saying, are between 2,800 and 3,000 feet in elevation. That matters. Cooler climate, cooler daytime temperatures. But what we get out of the wines is we get this retention of acidity, which is important, like Tim was talking about for ageability and Riesling, but it's the same in other varieties as well. But we also get this backbone tannin structure in the red wines. And so why don't we take this opportunity to evacuate your white wine and pour yourself a red wine if you don't have two different glasses. So pour yourself the quintet, and we're gonna delve into this terroir aspect, ageability, and this is going a direction that I didn't think it was gonna go. So, oh yeah. And Maggie wants to know if anybody made any of the recipes, because if you had the olive tapenade, which you really should call it a garlic tapenade with a hint of olive, it's phenomenal with the Chardonnay.
Yeah, although we sent it out with the quintet.
I know, but
I'll just jump in that one of our participants over in the chat, she made the bruschetta, and she said it's a perfect pairing, but she made both of them. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I think we have a question. I wonder if we should touch base on that before. I don't know if it's specific to the wine. So thank you so much for the wonderful wines. I love that you're providing the natural winemaking. Has the winery always followed organic or beyond organic practices biological? And if not, when did you make the switch? And also, do you think that the soil, food / web / soil biology has an impact on the terroir? Sorry for the geeky question. We have some fellow geeky.
So the second question, the answer is yes. Do you need more than that? Or so okay. So here's good questions. We started going natural in the vineyards with no herbicides and everything about 2010, 2011. And some of it came because, basically whatever you do with your funds and everything, don't invest in wineries, even though we're the greatest nonprofit out there. But we'll never get rich or anything like that. But our quality of life is pretty good. We get to eat out, we get to travel, we get to work with amazing people, we get to meet amazing people. We can't really ask for, and during COVID, we walk the vineyards every day and we have plenty of space to play around in and all that kind of thing. It's a nice lifestyle.
We never stopped working.
No, in fact, we're working more than we've ever worked. But one of the perks we did do is because when I was a kid, we had planted the vineyards here, but you can hire somebody to, so my siblings and I and friends, we planted the vineyards here, the 32 acres. But you can hire somebody to grow the grapes, to train them up the stake. It doesn't take an education really to do that part of it so much. So my parents had the opportunity to move abroad, and we lived in Zaire, what's now the Congo, or Democratic Republic of Congo, and we lived in Kinshasa, and they taught at the International American School there. And it was a great experience, and they could send the money home to pay for the ranch and all that kind of thing. So that was one of the things that we felt. We both enjoy traveling. We think it's great to open up the world to people's eyes, and we have 2 kids. We have 2 daughters, and we did a sabbatical in the southwest of France for 3 months and lived in a little village down there to learn about Malbec, which is one of the varieties, also in the quintet. But it's from the southwest of France in this region called Cahors, or the Lot. And it was there that we had incredible experiences meeting all sorts of people, but we met the soil scientists, Claude and Lydia Bourguignon. And these are 2 soil scientists that work specifically for the wine industry and are world renowned. We didn't know them at the time, but we were introduced. And it's amazing how they can tie vineyards to the soil types and everything. So a couple of years after we were there, they were over in California working at a winery in Napa, and they said, hey, we're in town. Do you want us to pop up and say hi, and we can look at your soils? So we pitted 8 pits in the soils with a backhoe, and they dropped down in and would go through and everything. And we had already stopped using herbicides and stuff at Madrona, but our other vineyards, we were still using Roundup. We'd stopped strip spraying pre-emergence, but we were using Roundup. And when they did Madrona, they're like, oh, everything's looking good. Your biodiversity throughout this, the soils is looking fantastic. You know, everything is looking spot on. And then we went to the other vineyard, and they're like, it's just kind of weird. It's not like it's unhealthy. There's just there's nothing here in the biodiversity. And then he turned to me, and he's like, are you strip spraying here? I'm like, maybe. And so that was from that point on, we started to change everything. And so I can tell you it's more expensive to farm naturally or organically. We're not biodynamic. That's the next step, where you use the lunar cycle and everything for a lot of your decisions. We're not at that point of it, because I need to figure out how that fits in with our sustainability models and what we're trying to do. But I firmly believe in farming naturally and organically, because ultimately your investment is in the soil. And if you continue to try and amend the soil or change it or do these types of things, you're getting farther and farther away from the holy grail, which is terroir, because you're no longer tasting the essence of the region, you're tasting the amendments and changes and everything. It also means, like a year like this, where climate change, in my opinion, with the heat spikes and everything, we're seeing major differences in the field. And those heat spikes about a month ago and about 2 weeks ago made the leaf hoppers, which is a little tiny leaf, it eats the chlorophyll out of the leaves, go crazy, and the population really went up. And because we farm organically, the only thing you can spray, you can't spray anything to kill them. You can't spray a plot or diazinon or something like that. You can only spray clay. And what clay does is it puts an impervious layer between the leaf and the leaf hopper, so it can't pick through it to get to the chlorophyll. And then they choose to go to the grass or other types of things around. But what it makes your vineyard look like is kind of like hell. You know, it just, they're kind of burnt and white at the same time. The fruit's fine, the fruit's tasting great and everything like that, but it's just limits your choices. But it was such an important thing that we're like, yep, we're gonna just keep going with this because we believe in it, and that's what we're doing. So
Paul, if I may jump in real quick, I have a couple of questions and just some comments over in the chat. Your comments and the about the biologic farming in your practices are well received. We have some people who are definitely appreciative of that, and certainly it's music to their ears. And so you also mentioned you know, about the climate and the weather patterns, and we have a question about the wildfire and the smoke and has that had an effect? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so let's go to the first part of it.
Okay.
Which is, thank you for the kudos on farming naturally. In some ways, please be realistic as well, though, that we grow grapes. Grapes can handle it fairly easily. And we saw it in Alsace where it rains every day during the summer and stuff, and they're farming organically. It's like, if they can do it in Alsace, we can certainly do it in California. And so part of our idea was that we would come back, do it, show that you can farm 85 acres as one of the larger vineyards in the area, that others would follow behind. And it's slowly coming and everything, but that we're not out of business. We're still in business, and we do it this way, and it works. It's much more difficult on apples. Apples where people don't want to have worms in them and all those types of things. There's a balance to it where you need to figure out how to stay in business and still be able to do it, and what's possible and what's not possible. And in grapes, it's possible. In a lot of things, it's possible. But also as consumers, the nice thing about, and going back to what my dad said when they were thinking about grapes at the beginning, we get paid for the value that's here, not how pretty it is coming into the winery, okay? That's where apples or pears or other types of fruit are different. And so and not to get on my little soapbox, but we all need to be able to eat an apple with a worm in it once in a while, or with blemishes or scars or those types of things, because it happens. So, okay, that's enough on that part. So, what was the other question?
Smoke.
I was trying to ignore it.
I think we've all been trying to ignore it without much luck.
It's depressing. However, we have been, I think, more blessed than other areas of California in that our air quality, by and large, during this 2 to 2.5 week period, has been better than other areas. Now, the last 3 to 4 days, we've had a higher count. Like if you look at Purple Air or something like that, which has sensors all over the place, our numbers have been up a little bit, or quite a bit. But previously to that, it hasn't been smoky here, but it's been hazy. And what's been happening, I think, is we get the cool air coming out of the mountains at night. It's cool, so it lifts the smoke up. And so we don't get those smoky conditions. And so the vines, I don't think, have been picking it up and transferring it into the cell wall of the grape skin or those types of things, because we haven't had that kind of intense smokiness to it. The other kind of, well, it wouldn't be empirical data, the data that as we're harvesting, I've had years in the past where you dump the fruit into the crusher and you can smell the smoke.
Yeah, the rim fire down south of us was much
2013.
Yeah, it was much more impactful than the King Fire, which is right in our backyard, just because of the way the smoke drained.
Yeah, and so, yeah, the smoke out of the King Fire went down through the ravines, and it was never smoky here at all. The Rim Fire in 2013 near Yosemite, it just blew all the smoke up against the Sierra foothills, and so we had a lot of smoke, and you could taste it in the Cab and the Nebbiolo, and maybe a little in the Cab Franc, in the Quintet, because it was Cab based. Yeah. So, but the difficulty with it is that it doesn't age linearly in all the bottles the same. So you may end up getting a bottle, and they learned this in 2008 in Mendocino, I believe, where one bottle may taste like a campfire, one bottle just has a little bit of smokiness, but one doesn't have any smokiness at all, and the next one tastes like you're licking an ashtray. So you run the risk that even if you love licking ashtrays, that you're not going to get every single bottle tasting that way. So having said that, so far everything, we'll know more post-fermentations, but everything that's been fermenting, I'm not picking up any smokiness in the product at the, in tasting. And we taste every day throughout the winery on all the wines. So could that change? Yeah, because the scary thing for us is we don't really consider this fire season yet. Fire season is late September and October, you know, and I guess now into November. So let's just knock on wood that we don't have any more lightning strikes and those kind of things. So can we talk about wine now? And
Yes.
even
Well,
though it's a depressant, yes. I don't want to be talking about depressing things.
So the answer,
so the good question.
Yes, the smoke does affect it, and it's very unpredictable. So drink it within your 6 hours.
That is not the takeaway that I was talking about. But so far, it looks like the El Dorado appellation is doing okay. So sorry, I am going to say one more depressing thing about this. And if I don't know if you remember the 89 vintage or the 98 vintage, but those were two vintages that were less than stellar in some areas that tend to get more media hype. And so many of the wineries in those areas, because it rained a lot on the coast in 89 and 98 was cool and rainy, a lot of wineries declassified their wines and they decided the quality's not there and stuff. But areas like 89 was a beautiful vintage in the Sierra foothills because we didn't get the rains the way they did on the coast, okay? But because the media meaning, you know, wine media, had come out and said bad vintage, you couldn't give the wine away. And so make your own decisions by going to the regions and tasting the wines and everything from the vintage. And understand that the fun thing about wine is you are tasting something from that vintage. You are tasting a timestamp. The wines this vintage will be different. We are changing, you know, winemaking, how we're doing the fermentations and everything in order to minimize any opportunity for smoke taint in there or something like that. So embrace the fact that each year is something different. You don't want it to be like Twinkies where they taste the same through the entire millennium, but it's just embrace its uniqueness. So, but so far quality looks really good this year. So hopefully that will stick around, hoping. All right, Quintet.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody, cheers. So Quintet is, yeah, sorry, I'm gonna do that. So the Quintet is a mixture of 5. Of course, but not a quartet, not a trio, not a sextet, although someday we'll make that because I think the marketing behind that be, anyways. Dang it. So, Quintet, it's a blend. Cab, Cab Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. So they're all Bordeaux varieties, predominant. I mean, Malbec, you could argue, is from the southwest of France and Cab Franc from the Loire. But they're all used in Bordeaux, on the left bank and the right bank in Bordeaux. Traditionally, use Cabernet Sauvignon as your base wine for ageability, structure, those types of things. Use Cabernet Franc for complexity, Merlot for mid-palate, and it tends to fill in the voids on a wine. It's a chameleon wine. It's really easy to blend with it because it doesn't want to take over the blend. Malbec is used for aromatics and color, and Petit Verdot is used for backbone, structure, and color, okay? So we've been making Quintet since 1992. Not every year. It has to be years that we really believe in. And out of all of those vintages, only 3 have not been Cabernet Sauvignon based. That is just the tradition. Well, welcome to embracing the vintage. If you look at your sheet, which you should have all memorized by now, this is a blend of predominantly Petit Verdot and Malbec. So it's got like 32% Petit Verdot in it. Now, Petit Verdot is this big, dark, blackberry-oriented wine. And so it's kind of brooding in its characteristics, which is also a really good term to throw out when you're brooding, because it doesn't really mean anything, but it sounds cool. But it has this kind of dark, very dark blackberry characteristic, okay? Now Malbec, because it has that incredible color and has that blueberry black cherry characteristic, kind of meld together into it. It also has a rounder palate. Both of those varieties can have this roundness to them. So this is a wine that is almost seductive in its characteristics. So The Merlot still does its job of filling in the voids, giving a little bit more of the black cherry in the mid palate, and then the Cabernet for elegance on the backside because it was almost too big. And so I needed to kind of make it more linear and more balanced on the palate. And then lastly, the Cabernet Franc to give that bit of spice rack character to the wine. So truly, this is a wine that you can have with, I mean, it's great with portobello mushrooms. It's good with garlic. Oh, I did. I like it. Yeah. Okay. So we can have that later. So sorry, family business. But it's also phenomenal. It's not so much a wine for like heavy beef stews, but instead something more like braised short ribs. So something that has a little bit more fat if you're doing that, or has the texture because you can do it with eggplant, you can do it with mushrooms as well. Something that has that kind of richer texture to it. You'll want to kind of go with that and the bridge ingredients in this. And the number one thing that I would recommend on that, if you're going to bridge, salt. The wonderful thing about salt is it brings fruitiness out in things. So you ever wonder why people put salt onto the
Watermelon.
Meat?
Oh, watermelon too. No, the grapefruit. Grapefruit too, but watermelon too. It's because it brings fruitiness out in it. If you're making a tomato sauce and you want it to be more popping with the tomatoey characters, you don't add sugar, you add salt. And so same type of thing. You have this with something that has a little bit of salt to it. You could even do it with like something with a dry rub on it, and then have it with this. It'll make the fruit even pop more on it. So the big question is going to be how long to age it.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna lose that.
No, we have
Fermenting barrels.
I love that you're all sitting in the same place above the lake there, and that you have no smoky conditions at all.
That's right.
We weren't smart enough to do a screenshot and sit in front of it, so there are actually barrels behind us. But the Barbera Rosé in the barrel is fermenting, and it keeps off-gassing, and we're waiting for the bung to blow out and spew us all with fermenting wine. So it's going to be entertaining in just a little bit. So, but when it comes to ageability on this wine, I think you can easily go 8 to 10 years. Now, once again, if it were cab-based, I would say you should go 8 to 10 years in order to get that complexity. But this has such beautiful fruit characteristics even now that it's kind of like, what more are you expecting out of this wine? Where do you want it to go? And for me, I love it as it's tasting here. And so I would have a tendency to say, you know, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, find that special occasion like Tuesday or Wednesday and just have a glass of it. But don't overage wines if you don't have, well, never overage wines, but just enjoy it. Now, this wine did not need to breathe, and you only decant wines when you have to decant them. Even if you pull out an older wine, and we've been drinking some older cabs and everything, 09s and 07s and stuff. If you open the bottle up and it's tasting good, pour yourself just a little bit and it's tasting good right there. If you decant it, you're only going to lose fruit characteristics by aerating the wine in a decanter. And whatever you do, don't use an aerator on it. It'll soften it, but it will negate the aging that you just did for 10 years on the wine. Aerators are for young wines that you're trying to soften up so that they're drinkable and they have plenty of fruit so that you can add a lot of air into it and it'll make it, you know, through it. So don't abuse old wines. They need more cuddling and coddling than other things. So.
Good to know.
Question?
From me?
No, we're just saying, are there more questions, Rob?
Yeah, so we did have one question on once the bottle of red is open, how long does it last?
In our house, about 45 minutes.
Well, it's a living product, so it's going to, you know, it has a degradation, so.
Yeah, so some wines, some red wines that are bigger in structure and stuff, and this one could qualify, might actually taste better the second day it's open than the first day it's open, because you're giving it some more oxygen and everything, okay? However, if you find that you're constantly having partial bottles, you need to solve that problem. Either invite more people.
All right, here's my sneak on that. You need to buy a 375 bottle, you know, if
A
you're
half bottle.
a half bottle, and then rinse it out. And then what you do is when you open the bottle, you pour half into the 375 and you cork it. It doesn't allow very much air in. And then you drink the other half. You know, that way your wine will stay a little bit longer. So I'm a big fan of 375s.
Yeah, and because what you're doing in a half, if you have a bottle and it's only half full, you're oxidizing the wine and you're losing fruit characteristics with that oxidation. So Rieslings are amazing in that you can have a half bottle and it will retain its characteristics because it has such high acid and a low pH and everything. But traditional California Chardonnays that are big and rich and opulent and everything, they won't make it overnight. So each one is going to be slightly different. You can also go to a wine shop, go down to Cork and More or something, and you can get a canister. It's called Private Preserve. And it's a mixture of argon and CO2. And you put a couple squirts of this gas in, and the argon is inert, and it'll go and layer on top of the wine and prevent it from oxidizing. So, but if you want to understand the difference in, a lot of people ask, you know, how wines age, you know, and that acid is really an important part. It's nerdy, but it's an important part of it. And the example I give usually is to understand acid. If you cut a lemon in half and put it on your counter, and you cut an avocado in half and put it on your counter, which one turns brown? And it's the avocado, because it doesn't have as much acid as the lemon. The lemon actually won't turn brown. It'll shrivel and dehydrate, but it never oxidizes because it has so much acid to it. But the avocado doesn't have nearly the acid level, and so it ends up oxidizing and turning brown on the edges of it. And wines will do the same thing. And you can look at take a white piece of paper, and you look down through the edges of it, and if it's turning brickish around the edges, it means it's picking up a lot of oxygen from the time in the cork.
Unless it's Nebbiolo.
Yeah, Nebbiolo starts brown, but we make.
We make Riesling, we make Nebbiolo, we make far too many wines.
So yeah, it's a great segue into the fact that we're not the smartest winery. We have a lot of fun, and we've been successful enough to be in business for almost 50 years, which in the wine industry is saying a lot. But one of the things that we could do a lot better is, like I said, we're a boutique winery that makes 10 to 12,000 cases. We only sell locally. So you're not going to find it at the Costco in Bakersfield or the Smart and Final in Reno or that kind of thing. We sell local. Folsom to Tahoe is our range. So, crap, what was I going to say? You lost track of what I was saying.
You're segueing into our next question, which is
no. Wait, let me finish my last thought, because they become fleeting. When you look at a winery our size, we should be growing 4 varieties, and then have multiple tiers on each one. Your entry level, your super expensive, something in between, all these kind of things, okay? That's just good business. Instead, we decided to go not good business and grow 29 different varieties and then make multiple wines out of all of them. So you walk into our tasting room and it's kind of like, well, what are they pouring today? Because we have a choice of like 3,722,000 wines. And so it's a lot of fun for us. We get to make a lot of expressions. So we do grow Nebbiolo, and we do grow Riesling, and we make multiple Rieslings. And now Maggie's making her own set of wines too. And so it's that kind of unique experience that you're going to get through all the small wineries in El Dorado. Because like I said, they're all family owned and family operated. There's not a single corporate winery in El Dorado County. So, and that was my pitch. Okay.
Now, was there another question?
I don't know.
Yeah, so the question was, of course, is our clients asking about discounts for shipping, especially out to the East Coast. So I think it would be great and how we can get multiple cases of this great wine.
So we put together a program for tonight. If you go onto our website and you were to place an order, we're going to do $10 shipping anywhere in the United States on a case. And a 20% discount, which is wine club, you get your wine club discounts and stuff. We make an awful lot of wines. So if anybody has any questions about the other kinds of wines we do, we have a tawny port, we do port, all 7 Portuguese varieties that we grow, estate grown. Like I said, we do Nebbiolo, we do actually,
Zinfandel,
the only thing that's better than having one winery is having 2. And we also do Chenin Blanc, and we do a lot of Cab Franc. Yeah, Barbera. Our Cab Francs are really interesting. We have 2, one from Madrona and one from Recca. That thing is going to explode.
Oh my goodness.
I got it.
We may have a YouTube-worthy event going on here before
I keep
long.
hearing it, and I'm going, that's going to go off. I can just hear it.
Will it truly explode if it goes?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, no?
Oh.
Would.
Because I have, okay, now you can see it coming out of the barrel there, but it has a fermentation lock on it. So it has a little hole and sets in the top here that are letting it degas.
Okay.
The problem with it is it was just racked at, okay, this is going to get into the weeds on the nerdiness thing here, but it was the pressed lot of Barbera from, it had too much color to go into the rosé. So I separated it out and we had to rack it into barrels in order to start the fermentation. But it's starting the fermentation on its own rather than choosing the fermentation that I want it to do. So the wine and I are going to have a little bit of a talk a little later today, because some of these teenagers, you got to really.
I was going to say, it sounds like a teenager. Wine. So Maggie, what I wonder is how can people learn more about the different options that are available? Is there a website?
Yes, our website.
Can we follow up with an email to all the attendees about how to take advantage?
Yeah, why don't we do that? I can generate something tomorrow and you can send it out.
Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
I'll do that. I would have done it for tonight. We harvest, normally harvest for Madrona is like 6 to 8 weeks long. And we're looking at a harvest of 3 to 4 weeks long. And so some of the things, between COVID and everything is just a little bit overwhelming right now for us, but I can get that done first thing tomorrow.
Very good. Well, so the majority of our attendees tonight are located in the Northern California region, and so I wouldn't be surprised if you have some visitors, but we do have a fair number of attendees who are from other parts in the country, and so for anybody who's interested in more wines or more options, given that it's the boutiqueness, I would definitely want to make sure that we provide them the information so that they could, and also for those clients that are out there, welcome you to a visit to California. Happy to help you plan that. So Paul, you were going to say something. And
the one other thing that I was going to say is, and part of our we truly do believe in sustainability, which has always been explained as a 3-legged stool. One part of it is environment, one part's business, and one part's community. And we made a decision quite a while ago to be just in the local area, which we could sell all of our wines within basically a 50-mile radius. And if you come to our area of the Sierra Foothills, demographically, it's not our area doesn't have the most money. So when you look at the quality that you get out of this area, and like this wine here, it's off of vineyards that are own-rooted, 40-plus-year-old vineyards, small lot production, less than 200 cases, 50% new French oak, blah, 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 all the talking points. And it's $32 a bottle. So if you go to another region of California, you're going to pay triple or quadruple for the same quality. But because the locals have kept us in business for so many years, our pricing, I think, as well as other wineries in the area, I recommend exploring the area. They're very reasonable for the quality that you're getting out of it. It's like the previous vintage, which we're almost sold out of, the 15 Quintet and the 16 Cabernet Sauvignon. In last year's Wine and Spirits Best Cabernets and Blends of 2019, there were only 3 out of all of the multi-hundred wineries of the Sierra Foothills that were recommended, and 2 of them were ours. So, hold on. Sorry. But it's more understanding that wine is subjective, and I'll reiterate it. We make wines for ourselves, and hopefully you enjoy them as well. And I think that's it.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to cap the night. So this has been a treat, looking at the comments in the chat and the questions. It's been very enjoyable, definitely delivered on, Jim Johnson, again, a big shout out. Thank you for connecting us with you all, and for making this a wonderful, enjoyable evening. I'll definitely follow up with you, Maggie, tomorrow. We'll send out some additional information if anybody is interested in staying connected. And
Debbie, is it possible for us to get a copy of the chat, just because we haven't seen any of that stuff coming through?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I would just like to raise a glass and toast to a lovely evening. Thank you so much for all your knowledge and information, for a wonderful event, and for all of our clients and special guests who were able to attend. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate you, and I hope that you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers.